I'm joined with Will Thompson, investment dealer. Now, Will, we've just got you back in the office. You've been in the US, meeting companies, attending a conference. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so very lucky to have travelled and seen a few different companies. So I think I saw like over 100 companies and did I think 5 or 6 conferences. So probably the main one at the start was actually in New York when we went to the Goldman's Consumer Conference, and just it was really interesting because I think you're seeing the headlines, the consumer's struggling, interest rates are hurting, people are sort of downtrending, but then underlying all these businesses still seem to be doing okay. And I think you kind of concede in the data that there's still growth, like there's still GDP is still growing. It's not negative yet, so sales are still growing, and then the margin pressures are coming off a little bit. So I thought that was probably the most interesting thing from the US.
Fantastic. And you're also in Europe, London, Paris.
Yeah.
More companies? More
companies, and I think, so if you take into context what I just said about what happened in the US, one of the key themes, which I think probably isn't getting much publicised much, is that consumers still want newness and innovation. So I went and saw with L'Oreal, for instance, and they were talking about how, when they're coming out with new products at the lower end, consumers are loving it. So if it's in, a different type of eye cream or a different type of moisturiser or something like that, the consumer is still willing to try new things and do new things. They're just probably being a little bit more cautious. They're not buying the product they used to have and the new product at the same time. They're just buying one at a time, which is probably, indicative that the consumer is probably struggling a little bit more than they were around when they got all the stimulus from COVID, and they're just a little bit of caution because, where interest rates are and the rest of it. And I think when you bring it back to what we're seeing in Australia, it's very evident in Universal stores that this is happening. And if you look at their competitor, General Pants, who are unlisted, they're really struggling. So General Pants haven't been innovating, haven't been able to bring new products. They've been trying to drive sales through discounting, which is kind of causing their consumer to want to only buy when there's discounting. Universal, on the other hand, they're coming out with new products, Neo Vision, and they had jorts, and they're selling a lot of Crocs, but they're not discounting. It's only stuff that people want. So if it's a product that the consumer desires, and these Universal younger consumer, less interest rate pressure, but probably more rental pressure. Pubs and clubs and bars were really busy, so they had lots of shifts. They're a little bit less busy, so a little bit less shifts, so there's a little bit of pressure. But if they see a cool t-shirt they want, they'll buy it, but they're not going to buy 2. They're just going to buy one. Or they might wait the next month before they buy their next pair of Crocs. So the consumer is just being a little bit more cautious, but still looking for things that are driving newness. So that's what we're looking for within the funds at the moment in Micro and WAM, sort of brands that are still investing back into the business, and providing options for their customer, because we think that's really what's going to continue to drive growth for those businesses. And there are a few ideas like Universal and a few others we're looking at.
Great. You mentioned you met with over 100 companies. Yeah. Can you share with us a few other names?
The most interesting ones were probably the French ones like Hermes. We saw Kering, which owns Gucci, and a few of the other different brands. We saw Louis Vuitton, which was like probably the most bearish meeting I've ever been in my life. But I think the IR, when you meet with him, is generally like that.
Right.
Because they were talking a lot about how bad sentiment is in China. But a lot of the times when you're talking to the brands, they're sort of waiting for China to make a move. And as we've seen last week, the China government is starting to stimulate the economy. So maybe this is a good point to buy those China-exposed companies as the sales are about to kickstart again. So we're looking back at the portfolio again and say, okay, well, what brands and what products will do well in this environment if China is going to stimulate, and if interest rates cut in the US, what global brands are going to go well.
Great, thanks for your time.
Thank you.